Let's talk about the next topic in calculus, which is integral calculus. In the last topic, we talked about calculus being a vast branch of mathematics which you will study in more detail in 12th standard. And we also talked about differential calculus, which was used as a rate measurement tool. In this video, we will talk about integral calculus in more detail. Integral calculus has two major applications. The first application is that it can be understood as a reverse process of differentiation. So if I have a function small fx, I differentiate it and obtain another function small gx, then I can define an operator integration which says integral of gx with respect to x gives me fx back. The second application of integration is to calculate the area under the graph or area under the curve of any function f. So if I take my function f and if I plot its graph on the graph paper, then the area under the curve between any 2 points can be calculated using integral calculus. We'll see both the aspects of integral calculus in detail today. So let's talk about integration as a reverse process of differentiation. Let's say I have a function y is equal to capital Fx and the derivative of y with respect to x is understood as small of fx. Then I can define an operator integration which simply says integral of fx with respect to x, which is also written as integral fx dx, comes out to be nothing but y plus c, where y is capital Fx and plus c. Now here you can see there is a plus c, a constant I have introduced in this in here. C is also called the constant of integration. The reason we have c present in this equation is because if I differentiate fx plus c back again, I will still obtain small fx as my answer because derivative of constants are 0. C also gives me an idea about the family of curves which essentially upon differentiation with respect to x give the same derivative small fx as answer. We'll talk about this aspect of constant of integration in more detail in the next slide. So over here you can see that I have a function small fx which upon integration gives me capital Fx plus c. Now if I draw up the plot of capital Fx first, you can see in the graph here the black line represents the function capital Fx. Now I put the values of c as integers 1, 2, 3 and 4, and what I observe is that I have got different plots here as shown. The first plot is of fx plus 1 which is shown in red, fx plus 2 which is shown in blue, and fx plus 3 which is shown in green. What you can see here is that all these graphs are 1 unit away from each other along the y-axis. What is important here is that differentiation of either of these graphs with respect to x or differentiation of either of these functions with respect to x will give me my small function fx back again. So this is the importance and utility of constant of integration c. This kind of integration, which is simply the reverse process of differentiation, is also called indefinite integration. Now let's talk about an example on indefinite integration. Let's say I have a function y is equal to tan x which I am supposed to differentiate. So upon differentiation, the result it gives me is simply secant square x. Now the way I can define my indefinite integration on top of this is simply integral of secant square x dx, which simply means integral of secant square x with respect to x, gives me the answer back tan x plus c. Now this equation that we just obtained can also be remembered as a formula for the integration of secant square x. Now let's talk about some integration formulae. Over here you can see that the first integral we have is integral a dx, where a is just a constant number. What we know about the formula of integration is that whenever we have a constant inside the integration sign, it can simply come out of the integration sign, and what we are left is just with integral of dx. In that situation, that answer will simply be x. So integral of a dx is simply when a is taken out of integration sign and the integration gives me x as the answer and constant of integration c has to be present. So the formula for integral a dx is simply ax plus c. Now the next formula is for a polynomial function of the form x raised to power n. So x raised to power n dx is simply x raised to power n plus 1 upon n plus 1 plus c. Now it is important to note here that if I differentiate this function over here, what I'll obtain is my x raised to power n function back again. Going forward, the next formula is about the exponential function e raised to power x. We know that derivative of e raised to power x is simply e raised to power x back again. So its integration must also be the same function. So over here you can see integral of e raised to power x dx is nothing but e raised to power x plus c. Next, let's talk about a raised to power x. Integral a raised to power x dx is nothing but a raised to power x upon ln a plus c. Integration of 1 by x dx is nothing but ln of x plus c. It is important to note here that 1 by x is nothing but x raised to power minus 1. So over here in this formula, n is equal to minus 1 is not accepted. So this formula is valid only for those polynomials which are not raised to the power of minus 1. Because when it's raised to the power of minus 1, the result is ln of x, not this. As a student, you can already see that if my n is equal to minus 1, in that situation, this polynomial over here is undefined. So it is a very important concept you must remember. Next, we'll talk about 1 by x ln a dx. The result simply comes out to be log of x on the base of a plus c. Going forward, integration of sin x simply is minus of cos x plus c. Why? Because derivative of minus cos x is simply sin x. Next, integration of cos x with respect to dx is nothing but sin x plus c. Next, integration of secant square x with respect to x is tan x plus c. Integration of minus of cosec x cot x dx is nothing but cosec x plus c. Integration of secant x tan x is nothing but secant x plus c. Integration of minus of cosec square x is simply cot x plus c. These formulae are very important and you will require each of them to solve problems in physics. So as a student, you must memorize them. Now, let's talk about some addition and subtraction rules in integration. So over here, let's say we have two functions fx and gx represented by variables u and v respectively. Integration of u plus minus v dx can simply be written as integration of u dx plus or minus integration of v dx. What I know from here is that integral operator can simply be distributed across the functions u and v. We don't have a direct formula for multiplication and division in case of integration, unlike differentiation. So as a student, you must remember this. Now, let's talk about an example in integration. Over here, we have a function y is equal to sin x plus x cube plus e raised to power x, and we are supposed to find integration of y with respect to x in this case. So over here you can see integral of y dx can simply be written in this form, and I know that whenever functions are added, the integration operator can be distributed for each of the functions. So I can write this expression in this form. Now I can just apply the formula individually on each of them. So integration of sin x is nothing but minus of cos x. Integration of x cube is nothing but x raised to power 4 upon 4. And integration of e raised to power x is nothing but e raised to power x itself. And we must never forget to write the constant of integration in our answer. So my result comes out to be minus cos x plus x raised to power 4 upon 4 plus e raised to power x plus c. I hope these ideas are very clear. Now, let's talk about the second aspect of integration, which is finding area under the curves. So over here, you can see that I have drawn a function y is equal to fx, under which I am supposed to find the area. In the next two graphs or in the next two drawings, I have tried to approximate the area using rectangular bars. In this figure, n2 number of bars have been taken, each of width delta x2, and in this figure, n3 number of bars have been taken, each of width delta x3. Now in these graphs, what we are essentially doing is we are taking rectangles because we can very easily calculate the area of rectangles, and we are trying to draw rectangles in such a way that we are able to approximate the area of the curve. The same thing is being repeated over there. Now if I do the mathematics on top of it, I can say that the area I calculate in case of second graph can simply be represented by sigma n varying from 0 to n2, means I am adding, this is the symbol of summation. So what I am doing is I am summing up all the areas of rectangle where n is equal to 0 to n2, which means I am starting from the first rectangle all the way to n2th number of rectangle. And then I have to apply the formula of area, which simply comes out to be y into delta x2. Now how do I explain this? Y is simply the y coordinate of the highest point of each rectangle. I know the area of rectangle is simply length into breadth. In this situation, you can easily see the length of each of the bar will simply be the y coordinate value. So I can say y, and the width of each bar will be nothing but delta x2. So the area or the approximate area that I can get from the sum of all these rectangles can simply be given by this expression. What I have written here is simply the area of all the rectangles that I have present here. Next, I'll try to use the third diagram and repeat the same operation. So I can say that sigma n equal to 0 to n3 y into delta x3 will give me an approximate area by the help of these rectangles under these curves. If I keep on repeating this process by adding more and more number of rectangles and decreasing the width of each rectangle, what I'll obtain ultimately is infinitesimally thin rectangles which are infinite in number. Let's see this in more detail. Over here you can see that as the number of rectangles I use tend to infinity, the width of each rectangle tends to 0 or becomes infinitesimally small. In that situation, my sum can be represented as a limit. The limit we already saw in the last topic of differentiation. So over here I can write limit n3 tends to infinity, delta x3 tends to 0, sigma n equal to 0 to n3 y into delta x3. Now delta x3 is becoming extremely small, so I can replace delta x3 simply with dx, and I can write this expression as integration from 0 to x naught y dx. Now here 0 to x naught represent the upper and lower limits of the sum. As you can see in the figure, I am trying to find the area from x equal to 0 to x equal to x naught. So over here these limits represent the same thing. What I have done in this case is I have taken my original sum of rectangular bars and I have made it into a limiting case. What I obtain at the end is an integration, so I can understand integration as the limit of a sum as well. So now let's talk about the general form of a definite integral. Over here you can see that if I have a function y is equal to small f(x), I can define a definite integral on it, which is simply integral from a to b, which happen to be the lower and upper limits of the integral, y dx, and where y is simply fx. So the same thing can be written as integral a to b fx dx, which is capital Fx as my result, and it has two limits a and b, which can be expanded as f of b minus f of a. So in short, I can say integral of fx dx between a to b limits is simply f of b minus f of a, capital F of b minus capital F of a. Now in here you can see there is no constant of integration because we have already defined our limits. Also in this situation we can see that all the formulae of indefinite integration will be applicable on definite integration as well. Let's try to see this by an example. Over here, I have a function y is equal to x square that I am supposed to integrate with respect to dx between the limits 2 and 4. So I can write the expression as integration from 2 to 4 x square dx is nothing but, I'll apply the formula now of x square, which is simply x cube by 3. So over here x cube by 3 between the limits 2 to 4, and now I'll use the formula of definite integration and I'll put the value of limits in the capital Fx function I obtained. So I can write this as 4 cube by 3 minus 2 cube by 3, which will simply come out to be this form, and upon solving this I can see this is simply 56 by 3. Now definite integration is also area under the curve, so I draw the graph of y is equal to x square, and between x equal to 2 and x equal to 4, the entire area of the curve can be shaded and represented by the definite integration that I just calculated. So over here this area shaded in blue is simply the definite integration from 2 to 4 x square dx, which is 56 by 3. I hope this is very clear to you. So summarizing what we just learned, I can say that there are two ways to use integral calculus. The first is as the reverse process of differentiation, and the second is to calculate area under the graphs. Now the constant of integration c is used in case of indefinite integration, which is simply the reverse process of differentiation, and it gives us a family of curves which upon differentiation gives me back the same function. In case of definite integration, it gives me the area under the curve, and the same formulae are applicable for both kinds of integration. Thank you.